Hey, what's up, everyone? I want to talk about Star Trek today. Collateral Damage from the Next Generation series. This is the most recent Star Trek book. It's brand spanking new, and I've just finished it, and I want to talk a bit about it. I don't know where to begin, so I'm going to be kind of all over the place, but I think in the interest of not rambling as much as I'm normally prone to, I want to just give a couple of quick bullet points about this. The significance of this book is immense. This is, as of October 2019, as of this video, as of the publication of this book, this is the last book in the existing Star Trek novel continuity. Canon in Star Trek is always been different than Star Wars. Canon is basically just what's on film or on the screen, so the TV and the movies. But the great thing is the continuity, at least since the early 2000s within the Star Trek book world, have been very strong and consciously so. The editors and the writers have made sure that this is a series of adventures that interconnect within each series and across the different series, so that the Next Generation and Voyager books and Deep Space Nine books and tons of books that don't even have media tie-ins, that are created just as new sort of novel fictional worlds like Titan and Vanguard, and the list goes on and on, are all sort of connected. The major exception's always been the original series, because that's always much more about sort of having lots of one-off adventures and stuff, and it would be very hard for the original series at this point, given the 50 plus years of stories it's told, to have any existing continuity, given the fact that, if you're talking about a 5-year mission and the number of, the thousands of stories that have been told, there's more stories than there are 5 years. So, at that point, that ship sailed, but that's fine. Even with the original series in the last 15 years or so, there have been crossover events where the characters and events of the original series interact in continuity with events and characters in the Next Generations and Voyagers and Deep Space Nines and things like that. So Star Trek, not unlike Star Wars pre-2014, has had a great deal of continuity, at least in the last 15 years or so. Unfortunately, as far as we know, that's it. Why is it it? Well, it's because of the Picard TV show that's forthcoming. Now, we don't know much about it, but from what we've seen and what we've heard, it seems to be making continuity with the books really, really challenging, because it's set in the future, as are the books, and it's just not clear that, based on the things we know about the show and things we know about the future book continuity, that the two are commensurate. Now, the good news is, depending on your point of view, the authors of Trek have talked about how, and they've hinted at this and rumored about this online, that they're aware of these problems, and they have an interest too in keeping this stuff all in continuity, because they love Trek. They've been writing this. They've been developing the storyline. They want to be a part of it ongoing as well. They've got ideas for how to connect the two. Now, the downside is that we don't know what Picard's going to be like. Is it going to be like Discovery? Is it going to pose major sort of like disregard for continuity? Is it going to sort of just even seemingly lack the feel of Star Trek the way that Discovery has as well? Is there a sense in which doing anything to connect the book continuity with this new TV show is like actually damaging to the continuity in the long run? I mean, do we want to legitimate Picard if it's not great? Even if it's great, if it's not clearly set within the same sort of universe, right? Again, if it seems to lack that feel, seems to sort of lack the regard for the continuity. Again, why would we do anything to, put a halt to the interesting evolution of the Star Trek book continuity storylines as they are, just in order to make a left turn to connect? There's a sense in which I'm starting to think, maybe fine, if this is the last book, then let's lock it down. But if it is the last book, it's not the best last book you would write. And I think that although the book is really good, and I'll do a quick review in a second, I take nothing away from the book as a standalone Star Trek adventure with a great deal of continuity within a lot of the other books. But as an ending to the continuity, it's clearly lacking, not unlike Crucible in the Star Wars EU pre-2014. Had Troy Denny known that Crucible was the last book we were getting, I don't think he would have written it that way, and I think he said as much. And I wonder about David Mack, the author of this book, Collateral Damage, feeling the same way. I think the title, the more I think about it, is very interesting indeed. It seems to me as if the overall book continuity is potentially a victim of just the collateral damage of these new TV shows that we seem to be getting. We've gotten Discovery, and that's been divisive in the fandom. And now we're getting Picard, and there's rumors about lots of other TV shows, an animated show, a show about Section 31, which is interesting, by the way, because as spoiler-free as possible, I'll give you a couple of bullet points about this book. Section 31 plays a major role, as do the implications of events at the end of a Time 2 series going way back to 2004. See, what's neat about this book and what's neat about David Mack and a lot of the Trek authors right now is they have a really strong concern for continuity and keeping these stories in continuity with one another. So to the extent that you were 15 years ago wondering what are the implications for Picard of events towards the end of the Time 2 series, well, you get answers. And actually, again, as an ending to a continuity, at least Mack has tried to answer some of those questions, and that's really good. Unfortunately, the backup stories with Worf and LaForge and the Nausicaans and other sort of guest characters from the old Next Generation show are so good that you're not ready for this to end. You don't want it to end. In fact, I actually finished this book thinking, I don't want a Picard show. I want a Worf show, and better yet, I want a series of books about Worf. I want a new Worf, Star Trek novel series. Worf the Ambassador, or Worf the captain of, maybe the future captain of the Enterprise. So it's a good book, and I recommend it for Star Trek fans. I don't have much bad to say about it, except that, again, its title is very ironic indeed. If it is ultimately the last book, then I think that's unfortunate, given everything that the Trek writers have done the last 15 years or so to maintain their pretty tightly interwoven continuity between all the different series, Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and even series that don't have TV shows and books like Titan and Vanguard and Klingon. The list goes on and on. Even the Star Trek Enterprise books, which have had really interesting connections to really major story arcs within the Star Trek fictional universe. In fact, David Mack, who wrote Collateral Damage, wrote one of my favorite Star Trek book arcs, Star Trek Destiny, which has a major connection back to the Star Trek Enterprise, so to the TV show and to the book. So if you love Star Trek like I do because you love the great characters, if you love Next Generation, this book's a total win. If you love it because you love the continuity that we've been getting for the last 15 years or so, this book is a total A+. The only thing I think I would critique the book on is that Beverly Crusher's in it because she's married to Picard at this point, and unfortunately, they don't do anything with her character. She's basically just there to be in the scenes where naturally she would be. Not to spoil anything, but Picard is, throughout most of the book, involved in a court-martial, and so she's naturally there. And basically all she does is say good luck and I'm sorry. I mean, that's about it, unfortunately. So you keep reading about Beverly, but realizing that you don't know anything more about her based on this book, right? Which is kind of unfortunate. But it's a strong book. It's a great book. I love David Mack. He didn't disappoint. I've really enjoyed the last year or so of Star Trek books. There was a brief sort of slowdown after a great golden era, and I'm glad that we were getting this trickle of Star Trek books. But again, it seems like it's done. And although there is a Picard book scheduled for a couple of months from now to tie into the new series, again, unless that series has a regard for continuity, I'm not sure I care whether or not the authors have a plan to connect this to that. Because why legitimate that if it doesn't work? Why not just continue with the old book continuity? If the people who control the IP at this point are so keen to trade decades of continuity for a couple of hours of TV shows and films, then they're not worth our viewership. And instead, they should give us what we've been reading and enjoying and purchasing for years, which is just more of the book continuity. If on the other hand, the TV show seems to have the feel of Star Trek and seems to have a regard for continuity, and if the authors are able to make it work in an interesting way, beyond just Q snapping his fingers and making everything work out, then I think it is worthwhile. But if it comes to it, and if at the end of the day this is just the author's plan, and the editors and publishers and Paramount and CBS have no plans to connect these two, then I think it's very unfortunate indeed that this is the last book, given that as much continuity and connections and callbacks as David Mack has made in Collateral Damage to the TV show and to the other books, then it's not worth being the last book in the continuity. We would need a greater goodbye, and we didn't get that. And I think that's a shame. So I'm reserving final judgment until I see the Picard TV show, which I am slightly intrigued by, even though it does seem apparently to go against the continuity that's existed in here for years. But again, if the writers get their way and they're able to connect it, assuming Picard's a good show, then I'm excited. Otherwise, then this is the last book, and verdict's out on whether that's a good idea or not.